Agent, meet your team. Jim Affleck, no relation to Ben. Jim will straight up drop a bitch. He wears white butler gloves so his enemies can see his victim's blood. Rumors say that he is so badass. When he pours milk for guests, it's directly from the cow and it's always chocolate. Operative number 217. Lena Young. While not running her OnlyFans for lovers of leather-clad recliners, she runs DeadSec, a tough leader with a penchant for pricey posh hats. Dina can kick ass with the best of them. She also makes wicked good stew. Meet Old Sweet Sally, a magician hipster with an overdeveloped sex drive who looks like she stole Uncle Sam's costume. Her trick hip isn't the only trick up her sleeve. With the ability to weave magical mothering onto enemies to have them join you and your band temporarily, Sally is, for all intents and purposes, a badass granny.
And imagine those three were the best that you had. Those unfortunate three were the cream of the proverbial crop. What would you do to stop a citywide takeover of London? And that's the question that Watch Dogs Legion has for you. You're a member of DeadSec, which is not only the hacker group's name, but the amount of time it'd take me to drop this group and trade up in the game. You see, each one of these characters is a person from the streets of London, one of the entire city of possible agents. It's your goal to take down the military contractor Albion and its forces using guile, gusto, and some guts, and the occasional get-out-of-jail-free card in the form of 2-bit lawyers that you can recruit onto your team. Legion is exactly what the name implies, a game where every single character can be recruited as long as you don't mess up too much. This title has been in the work for years, delayed almost a full one, and now is finally out. Created by Ubisoft Toronto, it's out this week for PC, PS4, and Xbox, and it'll have a patch later for next-gen systems. Let's see how the third game in the third-person action stealth title did. As always, this is Karak with ACG, and it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. If you like the video, maybe subscribe. Let's discuss gameplay first. Watch Dogs has always been wrapped up in the governmental conspiracies of its time, from Watch Dogs 1 with its trench coat wearing main character Aiden Pierce and his battle against overarching government oversight, and tried to fix it all by causing as much anarchy as possible and hoping the problem would just go away on its own. Then you jump to Watch Dogs 2 with its lead Marcus Holloway working his way through the San Fran hacker underground like Steven Seagal with a pool cue stuck at the end of a rubber band. The games have always reflected the battle between the forces that be and the forces that'd be in trouble if someone found out what was on their secret folder on their PC hard drive. It's that conspiratorial feel of hackers and super spies mixed into one, but it's always had an issue. They've always been the bards of the Ubisoft D&D party, singing a song called Mediocrity and then remixing it for the second title. And that's why Legion is so interesting. Here it comes tromping in. It's a game world based in some kind of post-Brexit London, where terror attacks from a group called Zero Day have framed the DeadSec elite and forced everyone to pretty much go underground. This has caused DeadSec to recruit from, well, just about damn near everyone, following the story of the group itself, with the characters being anyone in the game world that you choose. And I do mean anyone. You can walk along and at any time scan a person and see bits of their life and clues and hints on how to recruit them. Later on, you can get extra tools that let you see their personal calendars, where their plans for the days are laid out, and you can use that information to recruit them to DeadSec by following around the game world like some kind of spy Slender Man. Walk by someone you think looks cool and find out what might turn them to your side. Maybe it's helping them get a passport for an illegal friend, getting a pal out of jail, investigating a company's fraud. Once you find that out, it's then your mission. While the main mission tells DeadSec's own basic sort of hero story crux, that's the main part of Legion, but think of the side stuff as Crusader Kings Light or even Sim Super Uber Light Edition, and you're a bit close. Every person in the game world has 0 to 3 skills and traits, from good or bad, meaning you might find an old hacker who's beat up that can't sprint or even hide behind cover, but perhaps they can hack card keys from a huge distance and can call drones in at any time to their spot. Or you might befriend a bespectacled construction worker who can sneak into any construction area, mostly unseen, but who also has an underground boxing career and is a drunk. So when he gets close with enemies, his just sort of powers through them and can soak up insane amounts of damage and somehow comes out the other end with a bloody lip and a fucking criminal record the size of Nebraska. This is all focused through Ubisoft's somewhat typical third-person open-world design that we've seen, where Watch Dogs and Assassin's Creed share a heritage, with you exploring the game world and taking on different missions or helping other people untake parts of London from Albion, who has control of it. Now, this can involve everything from major gunfights if you go in loud, to stealth as you sneak in and take out enemies without anyone noticing, to hacking every camera and setting up traps, luring hardened enemies around corners and into the line of a parked car that you hack and then run them over with. Like the prior games, Legion is a sandbox here with interactions in the game world overlaid with that unique presentation of people's lives, and that is what is the pivotal difference between Legion and the other games in the series. Basically, the technical bits behind this system is this. When you see someone bump into them or interact with them, the game engine starts tracking that character and overlaying their stats and story elements with other characters, ones that you have met or might meet. So you might have hired a brawler from the mean streets who's on parole, so he gets arrested by the Albion forces, and hey, he's stuck in prison longer because he has a criminal record. But you may find out that he has a brother who has been working hard on prisoner and criminal reform, and guess what? If you recruit that character who's a lawyer, he can actually get anyone on your team a better legal defense and get him out of jail more quickly. And the game knows how to set those characters up. And if you like these kind of things, this game is going to be your bread and butter, especially the first time you find a person with a great skill who is also sadly cursed with incredible flagellance, which occasionally will alert enemies during stealth. I like that not every character had positives. However, the negatives that are there, there's not a ton of them, so it feels far more realistic than haphazard like it could. Now, without Permadeath on, which I'll talk about in a second, the game basically has 3 states for your characters. Active, as in character that you can switch to at any time, arrested, and hospitalized, depending on what has happened to them. If you turn Permadeath on and a character takes real damage, then they're gone from the game, and their chances, their ties into the others, that's all gone. For instance, let me tell you a little story. I saw a guard at a palace. I wanted to get in. He hated DedSec, though, so I scanned him and I found out that, you know what? He's got a schedule, and I tracked him down a couple times, trying to see if I could while away at his willpower. One time, he met up with his sister, who wasn't so against us. I decided to help her with a mission, finding some refugees she had lost contact with, and she joined DedSec, and guess what? The game remembers that and makes sure the brother knows about it. Every character remembers what happens to those connected to him, including, by the way, unfortunately, if you fail, and I did that in this instance, and I got her killed in the next mission. The brother went from about to join DedSec to not wanting anything to do with me. And that was 1 hour wasted, or, well, not really wasted because it was awesome and a moment of singular or organic and just emergent gameplay that I like. And while not benefiting from this comparison greatly, I gotta mention it. It has a bit of a Nemesis from the Lord of the Rings kind of feel to it, but in a very lighter style and spread out across every character in the world. So yeah, it's a little less so than an orc who suddenly shows up and can't be lit on fire, but enough that it offers a tangible thread running through the seams of this blanket in the story. And if you sort of detach a little bit and accept it, there's a lot here. Luckily, while not excellent, the game's combat and shooting is about where you would expect of these titles, driven by a radial dial style choice system for your different weapons, as well as a couple pieces of equipment you can outfit each character with. Items that can be purchased and upgraded in 3 levels via points you get for performing the missions, and those can be traded in and out to any spy member on your team as long as you're not within a restricted area or in combat. Now, fighting itself is actually based on the character skills, and some of them have different ones. For instance, some characters have weapons, others know how to fight, and others stun or run away. It just depends on what items you have unlocked for your spy team and what kind of fighting they're good at, and if they have a crippling deficiency when it comes to hand-in-hand. Some may have drones and turrets and electrical brass knuckles, as if ramrodding 1.5 pounds of copper into someone's face isn't enough. Someone apparently looked at this and assumed, you know what? I think it needs 12 cattle prods attached to it. Movement and stealth are also pretty much bog standard, with you able to stick to walls and items, take down enemies who are unaware, as well as shoot them if you have any of the assorted lethal and non-lethal weapons. Now, the world of London itself is sizable, but not incredibly memorable. It's not massive like some other open worlds, but it's large enough to spread out and offer unique-looking locations and economic reflections throughout. And by economics, I mean faster cars and faster deals in the high class, and beat-up cars and drug dealers in the lower class. We're bumping off a drug user by tasering him in the nuts from a drone, and then watching this witless thug sprint through a gaggle of whores is not unheard of. I'm not actually sure what a large group of prostitutes is called other than Congress, so we'll just go with a gaggle. Now, this is big enough in this game world to require taxis or other kinds of fast travel and driving. You can do anything. You can also steal vehicles, and I'll say this. Driving with keyboard and mouse sucked no matter what. While Gamepad nailed it overall, I was not a fan of driving with the mouse and keyboard. That'll be up to you, but just be aware. How long's all this stealth action going to take you? Well, going through the story plus some of the sides is probably going to be 35 plus hours, depending on the difficulty and if you use permadeath. You could probably shortchange that and just go through the main story. I ended up turning permadeath on as well as high difficulty. I think this is a game where either you have to detach from the reality of the game itself and understand that there's going to be some shortchanging here and there, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit, or you just go in here as some kind of sandbox and shoot a bunch of people. Either way, but I will say this, if you give a little, you're actually gonna get a lot back when it comes to that style of gameplay. Make no mistake though, Legion does not do a ton of things wholly different, and in many ways it doesn't dig itself out of the rut that I personally felt Watch Dogs 2 set it in. However, there is no denying whatsoever that I had some of the best times with my ragtag group of heroes, and that ability to take Martha, Dumpster Brow, and Johnny Seen Better Days into a fucking special forces training center, and by somehow using nothing but smarts, well-placed hacks, a bit of luck, and somehow getting in and out is epic. Lastly, monetizations. Is it in here? Yes, it is. And this is friggin' weird. Let me describe this. There's 4 agents you can purchase right now. They aren't really special in any way. In fact, mine are better. But they do come with clothes, and it feels to me like they're just sort of there to entice you if you don't want to just buy some money in-game and then buy some different clothing. You do get these specialized characters. They look sort of funky, but you can get a lot of that stuff in the store. That'll be up to you. They have some unique lines as well, but they're mostly ignorable. The rest is a couple clothing types as well as 2 sets of currency, one in the game and, well, one in the game, but you buy it outside the game and then turn it into in-game currency. I hate that shit, by the way. While not nearly as bad as other Ubisoft games, really to me, it makes no reason to be here. Despite being non-impacting on most of the gameplay and certainly on the performance, that to me is even more of an indicator they didn't need to put it in here versus being fine that it is in here. When it comes to multiplayer, which will come at a later patch at a later date, we'll have to keep our eyes open to see if maybe there's something there. And that brings us to graphics. When Legion has everything going for it, when you're on a drone flying over a bridge across the water on a clear day and you can see all of London, it looks good. Or when your ray tracing is on and it's storming outside and the reflections and the lighting are just perfect. Or you're walking through a park and watching everybody just sort of play around. But a little bit like that unhinged ex who looked really good but always felt like they were about to fall apart. That's the game. It's got a futuristic look for London, and to be honest, it's a bit drab for my taste, actually. It's got a huge number of locations, but many of those don't have a lot of interaction. In fact, it was sad to see that other than bars, most other places you actually couldn't go into. Now, this hurt that feeling of interaction, especially because you are supposed to be fucking Jenny from the street, right? Instead, the only thing street about you is where you're buying your friggin' clothes, because most of the stores make you stand out on the street and put them on in front of digital billboards, which isn't creepy enough when you think about it. And as you go around the game world, there's a couple things to collect, including various face masks, which are used as disguises while in enemy territories. Now, just assume that God 404 errored as he was writing the code of all of the faces on the characters in this game, and you'll pretty much get an idea of what they look like. Trust me, some of them need to be wearing the masks all the time. I don't get what's going on in this game. I'm not sure what Ubisoft does when they generate the characters, but it's a little bit like the world's scariest family reunion around here. They just look weird, especially in the game and in the HUD. This isn't helped by the voice technology and lip syncing being loose at best and just straight up not giving a shit at the worst. I've seen cave openings more animated than some of these dudes' yawn holes when they're talking. And it's bad enough that there's one character on my team that when he talks, I sort of shit, it scares me so much because it doesn't look like he's talking, and I keep thinking the game is going to have like a ghost in the machine moment. Also, everyone's beard, like everybody, it looks like somebody shaved 4 angry beavers and then just threw the hair at somebody's face as they ran off and yet went, yeah, that looks good enough. It's like baby doll hair transplants for beards. This makes Mass Effect look, well, pretty good. And they're not all, well, yeah, most of them are ugly. I don't even know why it's so funny. But if you look at some, it's just so messed up. Because by the 7th or 8th cranky ass puffy around the midriff businessman that you take over or under your wing, or some strangely mismatched ruffian, you're going to be begging for a superhero. That's both the saving grace though of Legion and its fall from it. It's that feeling of everyday people rising up and each skill overlapping in a Crusader King's way of making them all sort of feel a little bit real. Why's Bob going to mourn at the bridge every night when he goes over and then he has a drink late at night and he's strangely late to work every single morning? Is he falling apart? You don't know, and maybe you won't find out. But it's that extra bit of thought process that allows for a gamer to put 2 and 2 together and make 3 instead of 4. And by now you might be thinking, man, does this guy have anything good to say about the way the game looks? Is it always ugly? No, well, a lot of times. But it's just, I think about it, that most of us don't look like movie stars. Most people look like guys shoveling horse shit in Game of Thrones. We don't look like the main characters themselves. Maybe Joffrey, though. While there are some animation issues as well, and I want to make sure to point those out, and there's some bugs, many of which have existed in Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs since, well, day one, it's pretty damn awesome to see how all of the different characters move around and react react depending on who you've recruited, from playing the saxophone for money on a street corner as I waited for a contract to show up, to spinning spells like a mage as the female magician standing outside hypnotizing people as I waited for the next cutscene. Unfortunately, for every good thing, there are some bad things, like leaping from a car and sometimes just, standing there, you just slide like 60 feet. Or this chick, one of my best agents, who apparently in a fit of rage so profound that I didn't choose her for a mission, sprinted into the wall of the building and headbutted it like a fucking test missile target. Let's get to performance. The game, it's a bit all over the place. Understand right from the get-go, this is future-proofed when it comes to the ultra settings. They're just not really going to work well, especially even on a 3080. You're going to have a problem with all the settings on the highest and with ray tracing at max. However, with the i7 and a 2080 Ti, I was able to actually get above 60 at all times with some settings on a different mixture and careful tuning of the ray tracing to medium or low and some adjustments to shadows and DLSS. Also, when it comes to the consoles, even next-gen games systems are going to run this at 30 FPS, and that's just the way it is. Playing it now, I can see why. Optimizations are probably going to come later in lower settings. The game actually doesn't look dramatically worse than the higher settings, but make no mistake, it should run better. And that brings us to sound, music, and voice, and we'll do sound first. So this is not bad. Much of the sound seems cribbed from the prior games, and I think that's fine because it is sharing those games' lineage in the overall game world. One of the things I actually really like here is there's a number of distortion effects depending on your status. And things like machine guns in particular have a unique and varied sample bank, with the rattle mechanics moving and shaking as you beat in on some poor dude just sitting there trying to pay child support as a guard, and you gun him down and then land your drone on his body. It wasn't absolutely stupendous. Also, electric cars pretty much all the way throughout, so don't expect any really cool engine sound when you're driving around. And that brings us to voice. And one thing to get out of the way right away, the context here is that Legion uses voice modulation systems so they can have so many unique voices in the game. Many voice actors re-recorded their lines, and those lines are then modulated so that many actors sound like thousands of actors, but it doesn't always work. In real life, we still have Mike Tyson, right, whose high-pitched voice made him sound like a 13-year-old the first time you heard it, and people's voices are really varied in real life. It's just that here it pops up a lot. Disappointing as well when missions repeat or when you have a somewhat repeating object or phrase, like any open world game does, then the way they talk can be sort of grating. Now, this was highlighted whenever I did missions for people, and you can tell the two sets of lines were not really written to identically react to one another. So one person says, "Hello, man, you want to work with us?" And the other person's like, "Hey, I would love to work with you if you have a slot open. What's working with you going to be like, and who are you?" It works, but it doesn't always make it feel like it makes sense. That being said, half of the games out there, they can't even get their voice acting right when they have voice actors for every single line. So here, it is what it is. And that brings us to music. And yeah, it is what it is here too as well. Lots of licensed tracks in the taxis, which was nice, I guess, but nothing really caught my ear. Sometimes in battle, there was a stir-up moment with a nice theme that built up when you were going through battle, but it never really struck with me. Ultimately, most of Legion I spent realizing music was playing suddenly, or suddenly realizing it wasn't, and neither is really a great response for a soundtrack. Maybe you'll like it more than me, but it just didn't grab me. How's all this come together? Well, that brings us to fun factor. There is an intrinsic childlike feeling to Legion, even at its most dire. Something about seeing your goofy-ass character in each cutscene working through a stealth area with all the finesse of like a frustrated linebacker after daily doubles, and then seeing them rewarded with taking out an enemy by dropping crates on him from the sky with a construction drone, or knocking him off the roof with the same. The emergent way in which everyone is systemically tied together by the game's storytelling engine worked for me personally, especially if just for a moment you can remove a bit of that logic cap from your brain. There are so many times where I kept thinking to myself, is the game making it so that the wife is working with possibly illegal foundations, funneling money, and her husband was recently unemployed but had worked for them, and she's now asking questions about their legality? Or had she asked those questions prior, and maybe that's why he was fired? Or that feeling of success when you take a character who doesn't like DedSec, perform some quests, and then have them join you, and it pays off in spades with a character that can now go places you could not go before. As I found out when I straight up super spied a character, found him, he had not only the skills, but the gun and the spy car. And I just found him standing alongside the road needing help. Not quite sure why, but you know what? I bought off on it. And buying off on this game is going to require a lot, and possibly too much from a lot of people. The gameplay is bog standard also. There isn't really a big change in the way this game plays when it comes to other Watchdog titles. Whether that's for you or against you, well, that's for each one of us to discover. Looking at the strengths of this game for a moment, it's got a serious strength if you can buy off on the story elements and having that feeling of just doing something crazy and taking a character you didn't expect through a mission you didn't expect and coming out with success you didn't expect. But it also means that those expectations are a little bit broken. For example, these characters, they're supposed to be a bit more street level, a bit more down on the block. And yet at the same time, you really can't go into any places other than the bars that you can go and drink at. You really just can't engage in a lot of stuff. And I get it. A lot of people will be like, why would I want to engage in anything? I just want to go through the main story or through the combat or the missions. That's great for you. But for people who are intent on exploring, there's not as much as I think a lot of people would like. And to me, that's even reflected in the home base, which I gotta say is sad as fuck. If Depression could build a house and invite his cousin Sloth and Unwashed over, that's what this friggin' place would look like. It's just the first floor is mannequins, and then you go out to the second floor and it's a subway car and a boxing pit. None of it makes any sense. It didn't really bother me too much, but I looked at it and I was like, dude, who's living here? And how did we get all of this shit down here? It's crazy. And that'll move us to the rating. As you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale if that is the score I give it on PC. This is a wait for a sale solidly, but I'm going to give you a little ratchet here, up or down. If you bought off on any of this stuff and you're okay with the voices being a little weird and the typical stuff that occurs in Watch Dogs, Assassin's Creed games when it comes to bugs and performance that, like I said, is not amazing, but you can dial it in. I want to make sure that's clear. Then this is probably higher for you. But if you wanted something really brand new from Watch Dogs and maybe the Legion part interested you, but you were more interested in, say, London and Brexit, this may not actually interest you as much because I didn't find London an incredibly enjoyable place to explore, at least personally. This might be something that you might find more engaging than I did. That being said, I'm still going to return to this game. I enjoyed the hell out of some parts of this. And while it isn't ready exactly for prime time, those monetizations aren't necessarily something that I think should be there. There are parts of this game that just had me laughing out loud in the giddiness and the craziness and the idea of, hey, I want to go and I want to search out what makes this character tick, and looking at them and tying all these things in. It's a little bit like a puzzle that you're not ever 100% sure you've completed, and you will never know. You'll get a character with a bunch of traits, and you'll get a character that when you look at their deep scan, they've got all this weird stuff in it, and you start to figure it out, and then they'll pass by a certain building, or they'll pass by you, and you'll be like, wait, are they here because of that? Who knows? The way the game is set up, you will probably never know. But one of the coolest parts in this game, for example, is being the husband of a character who I couldn't get this character to join in, and yet she was being arrested by DedSec, and I walked by it as a different character, and it told me, this is the spouse of so-and-so, and I saved them, and later on she was going to end up joining DedSec. Was awesome. She died, unfortunately, because I drove over her on accident. But long story short, that was still a cool moment. Just make sure that you don't accidentally drive over people. You'll probably have a great time. Anyway, that's it for me. Hey, I hope you guys like these videos. I hope you like these reviews. PS5, Xbox, next gen, current gen. Got a ton of reviews for you guys. I got my hands on the systems, doing a bunch of different footage, going to be doing a bunch of different new stuff. I would love for you to spread the word of these. Follow me on Twitter, please. At Jeremy Penter, that's on the Twitter. You'll see it at the in the description. You know, post this where people are talking about games. It really does help. And you can always become a patron. Patron is the way, sort of like DedSec. We've had to go underground, and Patron's the way to do it because YouTube just ain't working. If you guys join Patron, you get some awesome stuff. You get a secret place to talk called the Discord, which is absolutely unknown. No one else is doing this. It's just ACG, a special Discord. Yeah. Completely secret, unheard of. I'm the first and only YouTuber who's done this. But anyway, I would love for you to join. Peace out, everybody. Have an awesome week. Stay tuned for Yakuza, Valhalla, Cyberpunk, though it got delayed, and a bunch of other stuff.